It's based in practicality and science. Yeah, there's what the Hawaiian culture did, but that was common sense too. They used the resources that they had in the best way they knew how, and it makes a lot of sense still today.
Welcome to Richard Hawes' vlog, What Would Our Kupuna Do? I'm Leslie Lang, and today Richard and I are going to talk in more detail about what he calls the modern ahupua'a. First, let's talk about what that means. Just tell us briefly about what an ahupua'a is traditionally and why this came to mind as sort of a format for this project you're thinking about.
The ahupua'a system was made so that different people living at different elevations can trade and help each other out. So the folks in the mountain would bring what they grow, and the folks down at the ocean would bring fish and trade. And the result was everybody supporting each other. And because they didn't have any metal, they didn't have money. So it was basically reciprocity. And really, that's the foundation of aloha, the way I look at it from a 40,000-foot view.
It's kind of a brilliant idea to take into the modern day. I love the idea of the modern ahupua'a, but let's go into more detail about that and what that can look like. So first of all, you're talking about farming here is difficult. Farmers need multiple streams of income now. And tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so in Hawaii, where businesses got bigger and bigger and bigger, and the bigger they got, the more they depended on volume and slim margins. But that puts the individual farmer at a disadvantage. And especially in Hawaii, because we can't do mass farming, because the land that we have is not flat, where you can use big machinery and that kind of thing. But we do have some tremendous advantages that we can utilize for ourselves. And what we can do is work on trying to get smaller plots of land for farmers with multiple income streams. So that gives resiliency. If something goes down, there's another one to help support you and your family. And so our job here is to figure out what is the environment that we can provide for farmers coming up so that we can help them get multiple income streams.
Right, perfect. So now you, for decades, ran Hamakua Springs Country Farms. So you've got this large plot of land on the Hamakua coast of the Big Island, Hawaii Island. Mm-hmm. And now you're looking to move that into a whole different type of income stream that helps farmers in these ways with multiple things that they can be doing to support their families. I think it's fascinating. So speaking of multiple income streams, let's talk about streams. Talk about water and why water is so essential to this.
Yeah, the ahupua'a system is largely based on water, and water runs downhill. That is just gravity, yeah? So everybody that utilizes that resource needs to be considered. So we have 2 springs on our property. Now, our job is to show what it is so people can understand what it is we're trying to do, and then show what it is so that we can put in the native flora that would accomplish our purposes. The 2 problems we have is guinea grass and sugarcane, because what happens is they grow so fast and they grow up so they cover everything up and you can't see what's really going on the ground level. And that's a problem. So the first thing we need to do is take those guinea grass out, replace them with appropriate vegetation, and the same thing with sugarcane. So that's what we're doing right now. And the bigger picture is this. We had 170 acres that was for sale previously. Then I pulled it off the market because we thought, gee, you know what? We can do better, because it's only money, I mean, is that going to make you happy? Is that going to help future generations? But what we're thinking about now, we think could help future generations. And that's why we pulled it off the market. So the lease expires in October. The present farmer farming sweet potato has got a lease on that whole 170 acres. Mm-hmm. It runs out in October, but by that time, we should have a plan in place. So we're doing a lot of the groundwork to get prepared.
Let's talk more about that. So you're sort of seeing yourself as a land steward. I see that you're looking at all the different pieces of this, and the water is one thing, getting the invasives out of there so you can control what's going on. I know you talk a lot about soil. Talk about soil and what you're doing with that.
What happened was when there was this last really heavy rain about a month ago or so, the sweet potato farmer was planting his crop and it was just freshly tilled and ready to go. But the water came down so fast, it just took all the soil in the low areas and deposited it into our pond where our spring was. And so you can see exactly what is going to be the problem if we don't fix that. Obviously, the first thing we're going to do is after the lease runs out, we'll put there something like maybe ulu or maybe palm oil or something that'll retain the grasses so that we don't lose the soil. So that's the first thing we're going to do. And we're looking at the rest of our property the same way. Which ones are vulnerable, and we'll adapt and change usage as necessary. It's really pretty simple. We got to fight the sugarcane and the guinea grass before we can know what's going on. But we're making progress.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. And I think one of the most interesting things to me is that you're looking at this property on a macro basis. You're not just looking at one small part of it. You're thinking about it for a lot of different people doing a lot of different things. And I think that's different than how a lot of farmers operate or landowners operate these days.
Yeah, we were farmers for 40 years, so we know what it takes to farm. It's not easy. And people just kind of maybe feel like there'll always be food on the supermarket shelves, but we got to take care of the small farmers so that we can feel secure that way. And we can do it. We're in a real good spot in Hawaii. So we're trying to do a demonstration project, because what we can do can be duplicated in many other parts. So at least that's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
That's great. And I just want to say, when you talk about people just expect there will always be food on the shelves, we saw with the pandemic, you could walk into the supermarket and see huge long rows of empty shelves of this and that. One little problem, and it really shows up here on our shelves when we're importing food. So I think it's so interesting what you're trying to do. And as a pilot project, tell us more about, you're looking at the size of plots and the idea of, generational farming.
Yeah, the farmer has got to be able to get on the land to farm. So if you're looking at the farmer purchasing the land and starting farming when that farmer is like in his 20s, what youngster in their 20s can afford 50, 100 acres? It's too expensive. But could they make a living on 10 acres with multiple income streams? That's very possible. So we're looking at it from that standpoint.
And then the multiple generation thing.
Yeah, so if we're talking multiple generation, let's say that the youngster is 25 years and starts farming. Then 20 years goes by, he has kids. And then by the time that person gets to be in his 60s, he's kind of ready to, kupuna status. And then what we need to do is set up a system of land management where 3 generations can be on the land so that it's sustainable into the future. So how do you do that? How do you allow kupuna housing, the primary housing for the startup, and then the next generation coming up? And that's for the legislators to figure out. But we can make it known what we think would work and then see what they think anyway.
What do you imagine it looking like if it was running just the way you wanted it to be, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? What would we see when we walked onto your Hamakua Springs land there?
Well, first of all, you'd see all the running water and you'd see the native plants. Part of the native plants would be high value timber crops, native type of forestry plants. And the reason for that is, let's say you plant something that's high value, like sandalwood or some other kind of, there are many different types of trees that can be used for carving and stuff like that. In 25 years, the value of that is not dependent on the stock market. All you got to do is, let's say you got 10 acres and you set aside some corner of your property with so many of those trees. And then 25 years from now, you've got an income stream you didn't have to do anything about. You just let it grow and it's out of the way. So now you're looking at multiple income streams and also multiple in time. Now, a little bit in the future and further into the future. So imagine that, okay, right next to the spring flow. So the water is running. And you need to shade the water. What kind of trees would you put there? What would be appropriate? And then what does the understory look like? Something that's easy to manage as well. We're starting to get bits and pieces, 20 foot here of looking at the water. Oh, it's amazing.
Okay, you mentioned that you'll be ready this October 2024,
Yes.
to perhaps start with new leases for people. So what is the plan before that? You're clearing the streams and the springs and getting water in order. What else are you doing to prepare for that?
We're working with the university, the Go Farm program, because they're teaching the youngsters about accounting and all the technical stuff about farming. And there are other organizations that do that we want to participate with.
And perhaps that's where some of your farmers who lease plots will come from.
Exactly. They'll come with a business plan. It's not just walk up the street and, I want to be a farmer. Here's what we have to offer. What's your business plan look like? And then we'll select like that. We really need people who are dedicated to the idea of sustainable farming. Our job is to try to find who they are and then help them.
That's terrific. That's such an opportunity for young farmers, I would think. And then to make this be like a pilot program is also a demo demo project that other places on the island, other islands, other places in the world can look at and see what you're doing. That's really exciting.
I think so.
So this modern ahupua'a project is part of the Keoki and Malia project. Is that correct?
It is, because there's one side that's the modern day ahupua'a, and the other side is the consciousness about the clouds. There's two things that Keoki and Malia project addresses.
What is the Keoki and Malia project? Can you explain that to someone who's not familiar with it?
Keoki and Malia represent youngsters. And what we're asking is, what can we do today to make life better for Keoki and Malia when they get to be 25 years old? And what can we do for future generations of Keoki and Malia? I mean, multiple generations of Keoki and Malia. Because we're saying 25 years old, Keoki and Malia could be 15 years old today. And then that means we got 10 years. So it's immediate and is also generational. So that's how we're approaching it.
Well, I really applaud you because I don't think enough people do that, look forward. A lot of people are looking out for themselves and they're not looking forward to so many generations. So it's a really interesting way of thinking. And I love seeing what you're doing with it.
I really am lucky because I'm retired. So I can do anything I want. I can say anything I want. And I spent the whole time farming, so I understand the issues. And that's why I'm such a strong supporter of small farmers. I know exactly what they're going through. And most people have a hard time understanding how difficult it is to be a farmer. So we got to do things, and we got to make sure that our elected officials understand the difficulty and see if they can buy into some of the things we're saying. Because what we're saying basically is that we have less time than people think. It sounds like, oh, the economy is doing wonderful and all that stuff. I'm sorry, I just don't take that point of view. I think that fossil fuels are running down. They're finite. There's nothing, fancy about that. It's just a finite resource. And the consequence is going to be, when you have to replace stuff, the price is going up, like solar panels, etc. So we just need to be smart about what we're doing. It's not very difficult to understand.
It's such a great practical solution, and I love all the energy you're putting into it and the thought. It makes so much sense. Thank you, everyone, for listening to What Would Our Kupuna Do?, where every 2 weeks we post a vlog about preparing for a better future here on Hawaii Island, a better, more sustainable future. We'll see you next time.
Okay.